Okay, so yesterday Apple has had their big iPhone 13 event, and I gotta say, some things have left me super disappointed, while others have left me very surprised. So, is the iPhone 13 really worth it? Welcome to Zone of Tech, and let's find out. I want to start off with the non-Pro iPhone 13s, as these got way more improvements than what we were expecting. My favorite thing here are the new colors, and I'm not even kidding, the new blue looks absolutely incredible. I always got my iPhone cases in this color, and it's pretty insane that we have this shade on an actual iPhone now. The new red looks to be deeper too compared to the 12, which had a more orange look to it. Same story here, big fan of the deeper red. Reminds me of the product red iPod Touch. The black is now called Midnight, and it looks like a darker space gray, although not as dark as what we had last year. I do love this one a lot too though. We then have a pink, which is more of like a cream color with a very slight shade of magenta, at least that's how I see it. And then we have a new color called Starlight, which to me looks like a warmer white. There's no more silver this year. It used to be a very popular choice before, so I'm not really sure why Apple decided to completely remove it from the non-Pro iPhones. Maybe to push more people towards the Pro? The second thing that surprised me a ton is the actual performance of the back cameras. First off, you might have noticed that they're now positioned diagonally as opposed to vertically. This is in order to fit those larger sensors, as opposed to the leaks which claim that the iPhone 13 mini and the iPhone 13 would have the exact same cameras as last year. This is not the case. Both now use the same main camera sensor as the iPhone 12 Pro Max from last year, which was noticeably larger than what the rest of the iPhone 12s had. Not only that, but both the 13 mini and the 13 also get the 12 Pro Max's sensor level stabilization. Unfortunately, the low-light improvements that the 12 Pro Max had over the 12 Pro were extremely minor, so don't expect some major changes here. However, if you showed me this photo and asked me if it came from a smartphone or a DSLR camera, I would definitely say that it came from a DSLR. It looks very clean with practically no noise and also very sharp. But do keep in mind that these photos were curated by Apple. I'm more curious to see what the cameras can do once we get them in the studio, so definitely subscribe if you want to see our super detailed camera comparison as soon as we have them. The ultrawide has also been updated with a newer sensor. Apple does say that it does offer improvements to low light, although I do expect these to be quite minor as they haven't given us any percentage of improvement here. The image processing has been improved too with Smart HDR4. Once again, from the images that Apple showed, it looks very impressive with perfect exposure, natural colors, and a good level of sharpness, so I'm really looking forward to testing this out. Speaking of processing, Apple introduced something called photographic styles, which are basically presets for things such as the image tone and the color temperature. And you're now probably wondering, how are these different from filters? Well, for start, these are applied during the image processing rather than after, and they do not affect the skin tones, but rather everything else. So you can make an image look more vibrant without making you look like Donald Trump. We also get the new cinematic mode, which allows you to smoothly shift focus from one subject to another when shooting video, while giving you this machine learning driven depth of field. This is that rumored portrait mode video, although I don't see myself ever using this, so I guess it's just nice to have. The display is now brighter by 28%. Brighter displays are always welcome, and it can reach 800 nits outdoors from 625 and 1200 in HDR. Now, this to me looks like it's the same display as the 12 Pros from last year. Speaking of the display, the notch is also smaller by 20%, exactly like I estimated. But Apple hasn't specifically mentioned any advantages we would get thanks to this, aside from slightly more screen space. Like, I'm curious, will we get more icons displayed there, or larger icons? Like, do we get anything aside from slightly more screen space? We of course get the new Apple A15 chip, which I don't think is even worth mentioning as iPhones have already been crazy fast and this one is even faster. Unfortunately, there is no word on the actual amount of RAM. Previously we had 4 GB on the iPhone 12 and even my 12 Pro with 6 GB struggled with background app management quite heavily, so I really hope that we get at least 6 on the 13s. I will update you guys in a future video as soon as I found out. The battery is now bigger, with the iPhone 13 mini offering 1.5 extra hours, and the 13 offering 2.5 extra hours over the 12. Now, these are of course averages. I'm definitely curious to testing out the battery life myself, especially on the mini, which was pretty poor last year. The storage is now doubled to 128 GB from 64 on the baseline, finally. And we also get a brand new 512 GB option. And in case you're wondering, the prices are the same as last year. As you can tell, there's not that many notable changes aside from the camera and the battery life. And to be honest, if you already have an iPhone 12, I really don't think that you should upgrade. If you have an iPhone 11 or older, I would say that it's worth it. You get the new flat frame and you get some pretty major camera and display brightness improvements. Also, if you have an Android phone and you're thinking of getting a 13 mini or a 13, I would say the 13 mini is by far the more unique choice, as there isn't a single Android phone on the market of this size that offers this much performance and this level of camera tech. Sure, the battery life will be a trade-off, but you do get a crazy compact flagship. The 13 is also pretty good, although if you're coming from the Android world, I would recommend that you take a look at the iPhone 13 Pros. The biggest reason to go for the Pros is that new 120Hz ProMotion display, which after years of speculation, it finally arrived. According to Apple, the refresh rate of the display will be adjusted even when the scrolling slows down, so it will start at 120Hz and then go down to as low as 10 Hz rather than it being mapped to 120 Hz for scrolling, for example, all the time. It looks to me that this is even more dynamic than what we have on the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra and the latest flagships from Samsung. Don't quote me on this because I couldn't really find exactly how the latest Samsung phones handle this, but I'm fairly certain that all scrolling is done at 120 Hz consistently rather than it's slowing down. So yeah, do let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on this. Speaking of useful features, probably the most useful thing for all of you Mac users out there is Setup, our sponsor for this video. You might remember me talking about Setup in previous videos too, and that's because it is honestly such a useful product. Like, I'm a paying customer myself and I use it on a daily basis. With Setup, you get access to over 200 Mac apps that would normally cost you a fortune if you were to buy each of them individually. Setup allows you to access all of them for just $9.99 a month. And you get popular apps such as Clean My Mac X to optimize your Mac's performance, Bartender to clear your Mac's menu bar, Disk Drill to recover lost data, Endurance to extend your Mac's battery life, Focus to block distracting websites while you're working, and so many more. They're easy to find thanks to Setup's Smart Search that allows you to look up a word like server and instantly show you all relevant tabs. And hey, if you're still not sure about Setup, just use the link below to try it for free for 7 days. I was honestly very surprised to see that there was not any mention of that rumored always-on display. I honestly think that this is such a big miss on Apple's side, especially since so many Android phones have it, and the Apple Watch has had it as well since the Series 5. This is by far my biggest disappointment with the iPhone 13s. But the display on the Pro models does get some brightness improvements too, with up to 25% more brightness outdoors at 1000 nits versus 800 of last year. I always thought that my 12 Pro was quite dim outdoors, so I'm pretty stoked for this extra brightness. The Pro models now come in 4 colors as opposed to 3, but there doesn't seem to be that anti-reflective fingerprint coating on the steel frame that we've seen rumored. There is a new blue though that's much lighter than the 12 Pros, and it's called Sierra Blue. I'm a big fan of this, although I do actually prefer the blue on the regular iPhone 13s. The silver looks more yellow now, the gold looks maybe a tiny bit darker, and the graphite looks to me just like last year. The cameras on the Pro models are even better, with the main module now capturing 220% more light than the 12 Pro and 47% more than the regular 13s. This is thanks to both the larger sensor and the larger f1.5 aperture. The pixels on the sensor are absolutely gigantic, 1.9 microns, which are actually the biggest pixels I've ever seen on a smartphone, which means that low light performance should indeed be very impressive on the Pro models. The ultrawide also gets an upgrade from even the 13s, as it has a larger f1.8 aperture for capturing 92% more light. Again, from the samples that Apple has showed us, this new ultrawide does indeed seem noticeably better, but I do want to wait and test it for myself before I say, go ahead and get this phone ASAP. But probably the best part about a 13 Pro's camera is the new macro mode, which is done thanks to this new ultrawide that can also autofocus. You can now get as close to 2 centimeters from the subject and achieve similar results to the macro mode on high-end Android phones like the Galaxy S21 Ultra, which I was a massive fan of. There doesn't seem to be an astrophotography mode, although Apple has posted a couple of night sky shots, which look dramatically better than what the iPhone is capable of now. So I do think that astrophotography mode is actually there, it's just that it's not a separate mode, but rather built into the normal night mode. Speaking of night mode, this now works on the telephoto module 2, which surprisingly got an update as well, with a 3x lens, which is still incomparable to the 5x or 10x optical that we have on other phones, but at least it is better than the rumored 2.5x. Performance-wise, the A15 inside the Pros is actually different to the one inside the non-Pros, by the fact that it has a 5-core GPU as opposed to a 4-core. Interesting to see that Apple is now applying CPU binning to their smartphones too. Maybe that extra GPU core is what enables ProRes on the Pro models. ProRes video should give you higher quality, but it will also take up a ton of space, reason why the 128GB Pro models are actually limited to 1080p 30 as opposed to 4K 30 like the other ones. But there is also a massive 1TB of storage model now, which is ideal for anyone who plans to truly take advantage of ProRes, but beware, this now makes the iPhone 13 Pro Max in 1TB the most expensive iPhone that Apple has ever made, by far. The batteries are larger here too, and we also get 1.5 more hours on average on the iPhone 13 Pro and 2.5 more on the 13 Pro Max. Now, the battery life on my 12 Pro was really bad, like I could never get through a full day, so I am hoping that a 13 Pro would solve this issue. Unfortunately, there is no 25-watt charging, 20 watt is still the highest supported, but weirdly enough, the charging speed remained the same as last year, even with these larger batteries. And this pretty much sums up the Pro. We get a better display and better cameras than even a 13s. I still don't think that you should upgrade if you have a 12 or a 12 Pro. Anything earlier than that is a definite yes, as the camera improvements especially are, I believe, the biggest ones that the iPhone has ever received from one generation to another. But I think the biggest challenge for Apple now is to compete with phones such as the Galaxy Z Flip 3, which for a lower price is a more unique device, as it is a foldable. Sure, the camera isn't as great, but everything else is just as good. Overall, I would say that the 13 and the 13 Pros are worth it, mostly for the camera improvements, but again, that really depends on what phone you're upgrading from, as do keep in mind, if you want the baddest and the best cameras, I still think that the Galaxy S21 Ultra with that bigger sensor, 8K video recording, and that super impressive 10x optical zoom is the one to go for. Oh, and by the way, I'm currently working on a Things You Didn't Know video about the iPhone 13. I'm going to put all of my super tiny findings there that you might not be aware of, that you probably missed from the event or even Apple's page. That video is coming tomorrow, so definitely do stay tuned for that. And for now, I'm Daniel, and in the future, hopefully as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Enough Tech, signing out. Cheers.